Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning digital marketer and entrepreneur. And today I want to share with you the hard but fulfilling truth about achieving goals. So we all have goals and we all have dreams. And some of them might be very simple. For others, they might be completely outrageous and things that you would think would never be possible. And we all have different journeys to reach them. So we all come from a different perspective. We all have, a different journey if we want to get to a certain place. And we're always told as kids, right? Or the old saying is always that we can do anything if we can dream it. So if we have a goal and we put our mind to it and we set our mind to it and determination and we go forward and try to reach it, then there isn't anything that we can't achieve. But the question then begs, why is it that some people accomplish everything that they set out to, or seemingly everything, and others don't? I mean, it's a fascinating question, and it's one that's been asked for ages, and it's actually attempted to be answered for ages too. So it's really interesting because, there are on the surface a lot of very obvious and easy answers, right? So if somebody who sets a goal and works really hard and has a clear vision about it and drive and determination and all the traits and all the stuff that they need, and the other person has sort of a lack of that clarity or vision, they just don't care that much, they kind of are interested but they're not committed to it, or they don't have a timeline or they don't have a plan, those things are pretty obvious, right? Lack of clarity, lack of vision, you can understand why somebody wouldn't reach their goals. Lack of a timeline, lack of a plan, lack of passion or desire. It's just something that they kind of want, but it isn't really something that they burn for in the same way when they set a goal. Their lack of commitment or effort. So they've got this idea and they really want it, but then when it comes down to it, they'd rather, play video games or watch TV or go out with their friends than they would work on the things that they need to do to reach their goals. Maybe giving up too quickly, somebody who tries, but then when it doesn't work out right away, or maybe an unsupportive environment. Sometimes, people try to reach a goal, but everything around them prevents them from being able to do it. Or sometimes a change of priorities. Sometimes we set a goal, and as we grow up, or as we get older, or as things in our lives change, we change our priorities. We change what's important to us, so the goal itself doesn't have the same luster that it used to. And there are a bunch of other things too that will derail us before we get there. So those things are all very obvious, right? If I showed you an example of somebody who had that and then who lacked it, we could see from an obvious way, and we could point to the fact that, it makes sense that that person didn't achieve their goals and the other person did. So in those cases, it's obvious and clear and simple. But what about people who do it all and they still don't make it? Not every failed attempt at a goal and not every unachieved goal is based on some goal setter's flaw of their desire or their interest or their commitment or their motivation or their vision. Sometimes we can do it all right. We can do all the little things we're supposed to. We can follow all the steps. We can do all the things that we want to, and it still doesn't work out. We still don't achieve what we set out to achieve. And in those circumstances, it becomes a little bit more complicated and a little bit harder to figure out what it is that actually went wrong. I'll give you a couple of examples. So I had heard about this guy, and I don't know him personally, but he was in my local area, local market, and he had this great idea to host sport events for high schools and for other teams, and he had this really unique twist on it. It was a really cool idea. So he started his business, he quit his job, and he started his business, and he started to put all the plans in motion. He developed all of these relationships with organizations and schools and everything, and he was ready to hit the ground running, and he had sort of started the business out, and then COVID struck. Well, one of the big issues with COVID was crowds and gatherings. So if you're in the sports event business, where you're trying to put people together for a banquet or for a party or for whatever else, and then people aren't allowed to gather in groups, it pretty much kills your business. So this particular guy, well, I don't know him personally, I know his story, did everything right. He did all the research up front. He had the goal in mind. He knew what he wanted to do. He had a unique idea. He had something that wasn't already done 100 times in our market anyway. And he had built all the relationships. So he was all set to essentially open the spigot and turn on the floodgates. And as he was getting out of the gate with it, COVID struck. And literally an environmental force outside his control crashed his business, and he ended up going out of business and failed, at least at that time. I don't know whether post-COVID he's built it back up. I'd be interested to know that. But the fact is, this guy did everything right. He did all the right things, and he was tracking to do all the right things. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. Another example in the same sort of venue, and these people I know, both of my sons actually went to a karate studio, and it was originally run by a guy who was sort of gruff, and it was shrinking, and people didn't really want to be there because it's geared to kids, and kids don't want to be around someone who doesn't have a bedside manner, who isn't. Anyway, he ended up selling it to two of the women who were students there that became black belts and then loved it so much that they really wanted to do it as a business. They took it over, and the place exploded. They had so many kids coming in there because they treated people so well, and everybody felt so good about what they were doing that it was growing. And again, same story, COVID hits. So they have this massive studio that they've tripled or quadrupled the size of what they took over. That was very profitable, I'm sure. Well, I don't know their finances. And unfortunately, then we're reduced to doing Zoom classes, which no one's going to pay $200 a month for Zoom classes. And so unfortunately, they also ended up going out of business, but yet they did everything right. And so in those examples, those are business examples of people that actually tried to do a business and presumably did everything right, and it still didn't work out. If we shift our focus a little bit and we look at the world of athletics, there's a Mr. Olympia, which is the biggest bodybuilding competition in the world. You have to win another major title to even enter it. And there's a guy by the name of Kai Green who entered the Mr. Olympia. And I happen to be fortunate enough to see a documentary about his training and his regimen and all the things that he did to prepare for these Olympia contests. And this guy did, as far as I'm concerned, everything right. He lived a very humble life in a really difficult circumstance, and yet he pushed himself through all the things that he needed to do to become the next Mr. Olympia. He couldn't have trained harder. He couldn't have worked more. He couldn't have handled anything or done more visualization or any of the other things that it requires to win a title. And unfortunately, he came in second 3 times. So, here's a guy that did everything right and yet unfortunately didn't win. Now, second is nothing to complain about. To be second in the world at Mr. Olympia is a fantastic, phenomenal achievement. And, 99.9% of people would be super proud of it. I'm sure he is too. But the fact is, it's got to be disappointing because he wanted the title, right? And he never quite got there. It reminds me a little bit, sort of the idea of setting a goal and coming in second or not quite getting there, of the comedy movie Almost Heroes with Matthew Perry, I think, and Chris Farley, where they sort of mirror the Lewis and Clark journey to discover the West and the Pacific Ocean from the United States. And obviously it's comedic and it's fictional. But the fact is, they can see the beach from where they are, and yet Lewis and Clark get there first. So no one's ever heard of these two guys, presumably, right? That's how the story goes, and it's why Lewis and Clark were so famous and they were not. And there's story after story after story about that in real life that actually happened. And we normally only hear about the success stories. We don't hear about any of those stories or all the near misses. If you think about it, if you think about it from the perspective of Hollywood, right? Are you going to tell me that every Hollywood actor that lands a role is literally the best person at their craft that auditioned for it or that was available for it or has the best skills? Like all of the working people in Hollywood are all the most talented actors? Not a chance. Not a chance. I've seen local theater, I've seen Broadway theater, I've seen off-Broadway stuff, and I know, just like everybody else knows, that for every one Hollywood star, there are 100 equally talented actors. If you want to, really split hairs and say, okay, Meryl Streep, Dustin, I agree, right? Not everybody is at that level. I'm not talking about the top 1%. I'm just talking about working actors. Your standard average working actor. Some of them are phenomenal. Some of them have a hard time, doing their lines to a point that it sounds like they're reading off a cue card. I've seen movies that have gotten made, and I said to myself, how did this get made? Who did the casting? I mean, I've seen people in a high school production that can act better than this, yet they're in the role. So we all know that the fact is there's nepotism, there's all these other things, these other factors in play, and it isn't always the most talented or the ones who work the hardest that get what they want. And by the way, sports is no different. I see it in youth sports and you see it in professional sports. Every person that competes in professional sports, and again, take out the very top, they're obviously the best of the best. They would rise to that level no matter where they are. But if you talk about the average person who's playing in the NFL or who's playing in the NBA, there are 10 at least other athletes with the same level of athleticism that they have that don't get the contract, that don't get the job. Now, some of it is a performance thing for sure, but some of it also stems from something else that I'm going to share with you in a second. Because the fact of the matter is, some people get a lot more chances than other people get as well. Some people can fail and still get another chance. Other people fail and they're done. They never get another opportunity. And so it's interesting when we consider setting goals and achieving goals and what it really comes down to in terms of what makes the difference. So whether we like it or not, the fact of the matter is, achieving our goals, if everything else is equal, it does come down to some extent to talents, to abilities, to traits, right? We all have an equal chance to try, but we don't all have an equal chance of success. I loved basketball as a kid, and I played youth basketball. Full disclosure, I'm not that athletic. I'm not that tall. I'm not that fast. And so I'm just not that good a basketball player. However, I really enjoy the sport. In fact, I love the sport. And when I was a kid, when I'm out in my driveway shooting hoops or I'm on my team and we're warming up, I'm envisioning Larry Bird, who was my childhood, basketball idol, or other, fantastic players, and I'm pretending that I'm, playing like them and everything else because that's what I wanted to do. Now, I didn't set a goal or a dream to be an NBA player. Thank goodness for that. But even if I had, let's say that the strongest instinct running through me was that I had to play in the NBA. I had to be an NBA player. I loved the sport so much that that's all I was going to dedicate every minute that I had of every single day. Well, I can tell you how that would have worked out without ever having done it. I would have failed. I never would have achieved that goal. Would I have become a much better player than I am today? Of course. Would I have gotten far higher than I ever could have on my own natural ability? Yes. But I don't have the natural talent. I don't have the natural ability to become a professional athlete, particularly not in that sport. And so we all have an equal chance to try, but we don't all have an equal chance of success at everything. Now, some of us, I have strengths that are others. There might be some NBA players that couldn't do what I do, and that's fine. The fact is, we want to find what we're really good at. But some of it comes down to natural abilities, traits, and all those things. And then some other stuff and some other factors come down to circumstance. They come down to timing. Or dare I say it, the bad four-letter word, luck. I mean, I don't want to be the one to say it, but the fact of the matter is, it's plain and simple true. You know, you need to do everything else in order to have any shot to reach a lofty goal, right? You've got to work hard. You've got to have your vision. You got to be committed. You got to, but there still is no guarantee because there's all these other things, right? If you want to go build a software company that builds an operating system, right? Bill Gates was at the right place at the right time. I'm not suggesting he wouldn't be successful, but if timing wasn't exactly the way that it was when he built what he did, the whole circumstances would have been different. And this is true for just about anybody and everybody, right? If you're in a different circumstance, the game and the rules change. You may have the skill and talent and ability to adapt, but the fact of the matter is those things do make a difference. They do have an impact on whether or not we can achieve what we want to. And so it's important to recognize that, when we go into it, we want to set goals and we want to be very committed to what it is that we want to do, and we want to stick with things that we're super passionate about and that we will follow through on and have commitment to. But we also have to be realistic about what we are going up against. I've seen people on the show American Idol where they're auditioning to become like the next American professional singer that's going to make albums and everything else. And some of the people are phenomenally talented, no question about it. And by the way, there you go again, right? There's the top 10 on that show just about every single year are all phenomenal. It's splitting hairs to determine which one is the best, right? Because it comes down to other factors. It's not who works the hardest. They're all working very hard. But there are people that go through the audition process that are literally tone deaf. They sing worse than me, and I'm terrible at singing. And yet they're on the show, they've been getting coaching, they've been getting vocal coaching, they've been taking vocal lessons, they've been doing this. Everyone's telling them they should be a professional singer, and you're thinking to yourself when you're listening to them, is this a joke? I mean, is this scripted? Because you literally have no shot of becoming a professional singer. You have no talent whatsoever. And look what you're competing against. The very people that you're competing against are so much more talented than you. And talent doesn't always win out. If you're in the same stratosphere, maybe you could outwork talent. But if you have 0 talent and the other person has 100 talent, it's going to be really hard to make that up, in that circumstance. And so the reality is, even though we can't reach every goal, the bottom line here is this. It's not about being discouraged about setting and reaching goals, because it's actually quite the opposite. Because even though we can't reach every goal that we could ever possibly set in our own minds, we can do more, and we can become more than we ever thought possible by reaching for it. The moral of the story is that it's the process and the journey that holds the real value, right? If I set out to be an NBA player, I never would have made it. But I would have become so much better a player, and all the blood, sweat, tears, and hours that I put into it, I would have appreciated in the end, in one way or another, because it would have made me better. It would have made me more resilient. It would have added, basketball ability to my arsenal, but it also would have added a whole bunch of other things in regards to personal and human development. And that's where the real value is with goal setting. The takeaway here is that we all have goals and dreams, and we should do our best to focus and work hard to achieve them. But we also need to recognize that we all have different talents, abilities, and traits, and we all have different resources, circumstances, and timing too. So there are many factors that impact our journey toward achievement and the achievement of our goals. By striving to realize our dreams, regardless of the outcome, we become more than we otherwise could have been. And we gain so much more through the journey itself.